It's okay to be small, but what you mean, not very important or not very tall. If you're closer to the roses, if you got time for a call, then it's okay to be small. This big old world takes all kinds to make it, so if you ain't big, there's no need to fake it. It's okay to be last, the bottom of the corporate ladder, or not very fast. Take your time and do it well. Who needs a job that's half done? It's okay to be last. This big old world takes all kinds to make it, so if you ain't big, there's no need to fake it. This big old world takes all kinds to make it, so if you ain't big, there's no need to fake it. 'Cause it's okay to be small and slow and last. So when the final vote is cast, the top might be the bottom, and the least might be the best. The least might be the best. All right, so I just got here to this little temporary wetland right here, but just as I was about to go over there to look for salamanders, I looked down and there's a salamander right here, so I'm going to see if I can tease him out. If you look, you can see his tail right there. You probably can't see that on the video, but I'm going to see if he can be coaxed out. There we go. All right, cool. Exactly what I was hoping for. See if you can zoom in on him a little bit. So that is a run-of-the-mill dusky salamander. And so this is, so the other guys, the tadpoles that we saw, were representative of that one group of amphibians, the anurans. So that means without tail. And this is the group of amphibians called the caudates, which means the tailed amphibians. And that's because all salamanders that I'm aware of, at least, have a tail. Now, this guy is actually in a group of salamanders called lungless salamanders, which is why they always need to be moist. They don't have an internal membrane to do gas exchange across, which means that all the gas exchange, all their breathing is happening across their skin. And as you know, gas exchange is going to happen much more efficiently, he jumped, across a wet membrane than a dry membrane. And so that's why they have to maintain that moisture. They also don't usually, they're not marathon runners, right? They're not going to move very fast for very long. They can have these short spurts, but their oxygen limitation is going to limit how much activity they have. So I'm going to go ahead and put him back, and then I'm going to take a couple dips in here. My wife Becca is recording me. The dog won't shut up, and that's okay. Whoop! Oh, he's fine. He's right there. He's happy. He's right on the water. We'll give him a little doop. There he goes. Back into his little cage back there. All right, now I'm going to go over here and take a couple dips into this little wetland here. These sorts of wetlands, I don't know how well you can see it from over there, but these are really good places for amphibians because amphibians are really bad at competing with fish. Actually, that's a bad way of putting it. Amphibians get eaten by fish. which is an issue if you want to stay alive. And so they aren't often abundant in wetlands with lots of fish in them. There are some exceptions to that, but the places with the most amphibians usually tend to be the places that are sequestered away from fish, where they can get away. There's water most of the year or a few months out of the year, but they can tend to stay away. And that's my daughter, so we'll get Becca coming closer here with the video, and hopefully they will quiet down from that. All right, so dip this little pond here with the old cans and stuff like that, and see if we get anything interesting. I'm going to figure out what we got here, and I already see one thing. All right, so some bigger tadpole species here. This is some sort of what we would call a ronid or a true frog, that really sort of recognizable frog form that, you know, bullfrogs, leopard frogs, they're all going to be come from tadpoles that look something like this. Let's see. Anybody else home? There's another little tadpole right about here at the tip of my finger. You can see some little worms and stuff there, but obviously those are not amphibians. What else we got? What else we got? Oh yeah, look at all these tadpoles. 1, 2, 3. You can see some jelly from a salamander egg right there. 4. Ooh, that is a salamander. Look at that. Where'd he go to? Okay, this is cool. This is really cool. Yes, salamanders have eggs, Hava. All right, so if he stops, I think that this is a spring salamander larva, which is they're a super cool species. These are like the T-Rex of a stream ecosystem. They grow to be about 8-9 inches long. They look like a giant hot dog when they're crossing the road, and they actually eat other salamanders. And I think, let me get a close look. No, I'm sorry, that is a red salamander. Still really cool looking salamander, which is more typical of this habitat. But you can actually see, you see these little red things on either side? Those are its gills. So it is actually, it's actually in its larval form. It's actually in its larval form. So as it matures, it's going to metamorphosize just like tadpoles. A little bit less of a change, but this keeled tail here is going to flatten out. And then these gills are going to be absorbed, and it's going to take on this big bright red, this bright red coloration. So really cool species right there. We'll let him go. And so this is where life starts if you're an amphibian. And then as they mature, they're going to move out into the forest around us. And hopefully we're going to get some rain tomorrow night, where we will be able to see some of the adult forms of some of the species that we saw here. So we saw some toads, we saw some ranid tadpoles, and we saw a red salamander. We'll see if we can get the grown-up versions of these a little bit later for our lab. All right, so let's go. All right, hey guys, Holbrook here. I don't know if you can hear that sound, not the truck passing by, but the pitter-patter sound in the background. That is the sound of springtime rains. And so this is going to provide what I think is a good opportunity to get out and look for some amphibian species. So we saw some during the day. We saw some salamander larvae, some frog and toad larvae. Well, now we're going to get out at night and see them hopefully getting out, moving around, because they use cutaneous respiration, because they breathe through their skin. What that means is when it rains, that makes the whole world their playground, right? So they can get out and move around, and their skin's going to maintain its moisture. It's going to stay moist, which means they're going to be able to breathe and do gas exchange well, which means they can go out and move around. In addition, around about now is breeding season for a lot of the species of salamanders that are going to be out. So hopefully we'll get out and we'll see lots of cool stuff. So we'll see what we see. Come on, let's head on out. Okay, guys, if you've never been out on one of these shindigs before, this is called road cruising in the world of herpetology. Sometimes we'll try to make it sound fancy and call it road surveys or something like that. But this is road cruising. We're going out and we are going to leave. I'm actually by myself because, you know, social isolation and all that due to the coronavirus right now. But we're going to go, and we're going to go in a place with lots of good habitat on either side of the road. And hopefully what we're going to see is salamanders crossing said road, and take a look at them, see if we can identify them, and see how many species we can turn up tonight. So I'm guessing it's sort of a chilly spring night. It's not super warm, but I think we'll get a few species at least. I'm guessing maybe 5 species of amphibian. We'll see what we do though. So let's go ahead and head out. You know, you can hear that rain's picking up a little bit, which is really good for us in terms of seeing something. Not best for me right now because I forgot to bring my rain jacket, but that's okay. It's worth it to get a little cold to see some of these critters. But that's the really cool thing about amphibians, especially reptiles as well, is that they are really dependent on what we would call resource pulses. Now, what a resource pulse is just something that they need to survive. It's not always going to be evenly distributed throughout the year. So rain, for instance, you're going to have times a year where it's completely dry and they're not really able to do too much. Their ponds that they breed in will dry up. And then you're going to have certain times a year where there's lots of rain. Well, the cool thing about reptiles and amphibians especially, is they can really put life on hold. They can do things like hibernate. Or sometimes we'll use the term brumation if it's for breeding purposes, or estivation if it's just like really dry. But what's cool is, so they undergo these sort of slowdown periods, and they can just wait it out until the resource they need comes about. So whether it be rain, whether it be food, you know, so many of these species eat invertebrates, they eat insects, and they're not going to have them to eat all year round. So they can just wait. They don't have to, they can go for months at a time without eating while they're waiting for that resource pulse to come. Really cool thing about many amphibian species. If we're talking a mammal or a bird, they need to keep eating pretty much all the time. You know, sometimes they can go a week or two without food, but you know, the sort of things that amphibians and reptiles are able to do is kind of like if we were to just eat a couple times a year. So you eat like Thanksgiving, you eat the whole turkey. Christmas, you get up and eat again. So that's what we're dealing with, and that is in part because they have low oxygen requirements, energetic requirements. Oops, there's my phone right there. So they just don't need as much energy to operate. They're ectothermic, remember, poikilothermic. So their heat comes from outside sources. They don't have to generate it internally, which means that they can save a lot of energy and sort of wait around for these resource pulses. So we'll see what this resource pulse tonight is going to bring us. We're meandering around the road that we're going to be going on to in just a minute here. All right, everybody, we are here. We're at the road. That's one of my favorite roads to look for amphibians on. You can find roads like this anywhere, but this one's mine. This one's close to home. It's my, if you want to get alliterative, my super secret salamander street. So we're going to start driving, and I think we're going to start seeing stuff here pretty quick. I saw a couple of toads on the way, but just didn't have a chance to stop because of traffic. So let's get going and let's see what we can see. Okay, well, hopefully you all can see. Like I said before, we are driving. We're looking for salamanders and frogs and toads. So neurons and caudates. Unfortunately, we don't have gymnophioma here. We don't have caecilians here. So we're gonna have to deal with 2/3 of the amphibian class. That's okay. It's going to be awesome. Now, you probably can't see them. The camera's having a heck of a time focusing because of the heavy rain. But there are worms all over the road, and this time of year, I think that's what spurs some of the salamander and frog and toad activity as well, is the food availability on the road. That might have been a spring peeper right there, but we're gonna wait a little bit on spring peepers. They're cool, but they're so small that sometimes they're difficult to track down. Anyways, so what makes this area good? Well, you can't just drive down every road or any road and expect to see a lot of amphibian species crossing it. What makes this a good road is that there is good habitat off to either side. So essentially just the amphibians, if we can anthropomorphize them for a minute, let's stick with the right beams, is they just look at this road and they see it as a little bit of a inhospitable interruption to their habitat. So there's some creeks off to either side of this road. There's some swamp off to either side of this road. And they're in the creeks, they're in the swamps, they're in the higher, drier lands around as well. And they want to move between pieces of their habitat, so they're going to cross the road. In a lot of places, this can be a bad thing. This is actually a big conservation threat to amphibians, is that you have roads going between pieces of their habitat. And so we call this habitat fragmentation, or habfrag for short. But this is a really big conservation issue, because if you're a small, slow amphibian, then people are going to run you over because they're not going to see you and you're not going to be able to get out of the way in time. Now, if you're a big, slow animal, like a reptile, like a snake or a turtle, you're even more trouble, because people will oftentimes swerve to try to hit you. Yeah, you heard me right there. They've done studies where they've put out essentially decoy turtles and found that people swerve to try to hit these turtles. I mean, who hits a turtle? Come on, that's just cruel. But people do, and so roads especially are a big conservation issue to all sorts of animal groups, mammals, reptiles, amphibians. I would imagine even birds, although I haven't read much of the literature on that, because they're birds. But it is definitely an issue. So we're looking a little sparse tonight. Oh, a couple of deer right there. You guys see that? Back up, see if we can get those back on the camera. So what's cool is, oh, there they go. They're hightailing it. Whitetails hightailing it. You see them right there in the middle of the screen. Anyways, so habitat fragmentation. It's bad. Animals die. It's sad. Just to summarize. Alright. We're moseying on a little bit here, and we should be getting to an area that's pretty good for salamanders. It's a little bit chillier than I would like it this time of year. The temperature's 52 degrees right now. Which isn't bad, but I would prefer it if it could be in the mid to high 50s after a warm day. We would probably have seen a lot more salamanders by now, but there is other stuff out, and I have little doubt that we'll start seeing some. In fact, what was that right there? Let's back up and see. Now you might be thinking, what are you talking about? I didn't see anything. Well, that's because you have a small screen. Yeah, there we go. You see that? Actually, it's popping up really nicely on the video. See that sucker right there? I think that's our salamander. So I'm gonna throw on, gotta take our safety precautions, so I'm turning on the flashers, and we're gonna get out and see what we can see. See if this is a salamander. Oh yeah, that's a Sally, all right. So what do we got here? Oh yeah, here's one of our common guys. So this is Desmognathus conanti, or Desmognathus fuscus, however you want to split hairs there. But northern dusky salamander, really common around here. They're in a group of salamanders called the dusky salamanders. Like to live in and along creeks, but these guys are pretty habitat generalist. In other words, they're going to live pretty much anywhere that's wet and moist around here in the mountains. So even though they have low energy uses, you can see, move really quick when they want to. And I'm just going to scoot him off the road here so we can go back. Come on. You know what? Forget it. We're just going to we're going to make sure we straddle him and don't hit him. So first salamander of the night, northern dusky salamander. So we'll keep on moving. I think we'll see a couple more species probably. Okay, now here's something fun and exciting. We're on a back road here, not really going to be bothered, not a lot of other traffic or anything, but I wanted you to listen in on this right out the window here. So this is these are the harbingers of spring in western North Carolina. These are called spring peepers, and they're a species of frog that usually starts calling February, oftentimes mid-February if you get some warm rains, but certainly into March and April they come out in force. And like I said, in the spring these amphibians are doing their calls just to let everybody know that, hey, you know, these are the males saying we're on the market, and they're going to be doing this for the next couple of months with spring peepers. Getting into their breeding cycle there. Okay, I usually don't get out at this section of the road here because I actually had a shotgun pulled on me once here before when I was walking around. It perfectly legitimate, you know, just a local landowner. Doesn't get a lot of people coming out here who was concerned about someone running around in the rain. So usually when I have students out here, we don't stop in this section of the road. But since I'm by myself, we'll throw some caution to the wind and take a look at this guy, if I can find him now. Where did he go? Well, just a second ago, there he is. We have here, that is what is, hold on, let me go ahead and switch camera angles here. Okay, so this guy is what you are hearing all in the background there. That is our spring peeper, Pseudocris crucifer. They're really small. There's my thumb, or pointer finger for reference. Really good jumpers. Whoop. And you can identify these guys from all the other western North Carolina frogs because they have that nice X across their back. In fact, their scientific name, Pseudocris crucifer. Well, that crucifer obviously means cross. And they're called that because they have that X across their back. So we're going to keep going before we have a gun pulled on us here, and keep finding some stuff. Sound good? Let's go. All right, looks like up there we got something in the road right on the double yellow line. Go shine a light on him. Get my headlamp turned on here. Oh, there he goes. Let's go catch him. Make sure my car's in park here, because otherwise that would get real weird real fast. All right, so this guy right here, this chubby dude is an American toad. Now we actually have two species of toad that look very similar here, the American toad and the Fowler's toad. And easiest way I've found to tell the difference, they do hybridize, they do cross a little bit here. But if you look at these little warts, these little bumps on their back, they're not really true warts. You don't get warts from toads. But you see how they've got like the spots around them. Well, American toads, usually the spots, like that one right there, they're usually only going to have 1 to 3 bumps per spot. Fowler's toad will have more than that oftentimes. Anyways, so this is the mama version of those tadpoles that we saw earlier in the day. So pretty cool. One thing I love about amphibians is they don't have super well developed throat muscles. So if you go and you go like that and close the eye, see how his eye goes down into his head? They actually use that to assist them in swallowing, push the food down. Now, I told you that most amphibians have poison glands. You can actually see right behind his head there. Those are called his parotid glands, and that's actually where a lot of the poison is on these American toads. So, his belly. All right, now he's out there looking for a girlfriend, so we'll go ahead and let him go. Although we might do a slow motion here for a minute, because toads in slow motion are hilarious. Let's see if we can get that. Alright guys, I just stopped the car to check out something right here, which I think you'll enjoy. This is a pretty cool species of salamander. They're actually state protected, so I'm not going to touch it. And it looked like, yeah, this guy is actually, let me turn my headlight off so you can see me for a second. This guy is actually one that had a little bit of an injury, it looks like. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at him. So, I'm not going to touch this guy or pick this guy up, but he is tiny. So there's my finger for comparison, my pointer finger. So this is a really cool salamander called the four-toed salamander. And they are actually the only salamander in their genus. Pretty neat. And they only breed in habitats that are dominated by sphagnum moss. So they only breed in these sort of acidic, swampy, boggy habitat. So we're just going to leave him and let him go. But it looked like something did make a predatory move on his tail there. See how he's missing his tail? One of the cool things about many amphibians, especially salamanders, is they can regrow limbs, especially tails. So we'll continue on, but that's the four-toed salamander, Hemidactylum scutatum. And before we move on from the little Hemidactylum, here's another spring peeper, looking all pretty. So I don't know if it'll zoom that close, but they're pretty awesome frogs. 360. Look at that frog. All right, now jump to the camera for me. Oh yeah, that was perfect. Wish that was going in slow-mo. Let's keep going. All right, guys, here we are waiting at the end of the road. There's a little turnaround here, and usually I like to give it half a minute or so before turning around and continuing over the same section of road that we just did. All these salamanders are migrating, but they move kind of slow, so I find if I give it half a minute, usually that gives everything time for the old salamanders to move off the road, unless they're sort of hanging out there, but more importantly, new salamanders to get onto the road. So that's what we're doing now. I'm hoping on the way back, it was raining a little bit too hard, I think, on the drive up to the end of the road here. I'm hoping that the way back we will be able to turn up one of my favorite species to find down here, and that's called a mud salamander. That would be really cool. Another one that's really cool around here is called the spotted salamander, and then we also have another salamander called the mole salamander. All really neat species to find. So we'll see if we have any luck with any of those on the way back. But that's being a herpetologist, being a reptile and amphibian biologist, that's one of my favorite things about studying these critters, is you just don't know what you're gonna see and when. They're hard to predict. Even when you think you've got them sort of figured out, you don't necessarily know what you're gonna get on any given night. So that's pretty neat. So we're gonna keep on going, and we'll see what we find. Gonna turn off the light here. Bam. Everything's going dark. Let's keep going here. Let's check this out. This looks pretty good, guys. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. This was exactly what I was hoping for. These guys are pretty common on this road, so I sort of suspected them. Let me see if I can... there we go. That's better. You are looking at right here the beautiful, the majestic, the eastern mud salamander. So these guys are awesome. They just got that beautiful sort of muted red coloration, and in a lot of places, not a ton of herpetologists, people doing this recreationally. Not a lot of them see these guys too often. Some of them do. You really have to be keyed in on them. And when I moved to North Carolina, this was a species that I just was high on my list, and I found this local road, and it was just covered with them. Some nights we can get a dozen of these without too much of a problem. It's pretty neat. Their scientific name is Pseudotriton montanus. Even though they have that species name montanus, they actually they're more of a low elevation salamander when you compare them to the other salamander in their genus, the red salamander, Pseudotriton ruber. We find a lot of those at higher elevations. We get them on this road as well, but they look very, very similar. Usually the ruber, the red salamander, is a brighter red. There's a couple other differences. If you look at his eye here, you'll notice that the pupil, it's a big black pupil, takes up most of the eye. In red salamanders, it's a smaller red pupil, a smaller black pupil with sort of a bar through the eye. And there's some other differences in pattern and whatnot as well. So we'll hopefully take a look at one of those if we see a red salamander later tonight. But there is our cool little, pretty young mud salamander. All right, that's awesome. We're gonna just leave him there and go around him and let him carry on. He's probably, there's actually a worm right here, so he's probably out hunting trying to find that guy. So good luck, buddy. Don't get run over. All right, I just stopped here. There we go. Just up the side of the road for a second. To show you this guy, if you've hung out in and around Lake Susan at all, you've seen one of these. This is a green frog. So we get them pretty big around Lake Susan. This guy's just a small guy, about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches long. So, there we go. Look at that. All right, here we go, guys. This will be a big one. So take a gander at. You'll like this. I want to say this is one of my favorites, but I feel like I've said that about everything tonight. But gosh darn it, it's true. This is one of my favorites. All right, hopefully you can see somewhat well here, but this is our friendly neighborhood spotted salamander. Look at that tail. Look at that. Look at that. They're just gorgeous. So these guys are one of the species that are going to be breeding this time of year. They oftentimes breed a little bit earlier than this, but let's see, it looks like a female, and she's actually looking pretty deflated, so she's probably returning from the breeding pool now. So she's probably dropped all her eggs. So they lay their eggs, then the males will come along, they'll fertilize the eggs, and then they move back up into the uplands to sort of live this subterranean life for the rest of the year. Once again, resource pulses. The rains come, the water comes, and they go do their thing. They reproduce, make the next generation, and then they sort of go, they go underground, literally and metaphorically, for the next while. But these guys are really cool. Check out the spots on her. Really neat, really dependent on having fishless wetlands, which are not super common here in the Appalachians. So they're not as common here as they are in other parts like the Northeast. Northeast, these guys are all over the place. They're not uncommon here, but certainly dependent on those pools that don't have fish to have their babies. So that can present some issues if there are none in the area. So we'll go ahead and let her go, continue on her way that she was coming from, or going to rather. And where'd she go? I can't even find her with this camera. There she is right there. Hopefully you can see her. If not, oh well, we're going to continue on. And I think what we're going to do, we're almost at the end of the road now, but I've got one more salamander that I would like to find for you guys. It is the T-Rex of the salamander world. So we're going to go a little bit south of here, maybe like half an hour south. Don't fret, because you don't actually have to wait that long for the video. But we're going to go and see if we can turn one of them up. They are called spring salamanders. They're orangey, and when they cross the road, it looks like a hot dog crossing the road, which is kind of neat. So we'll go ahead and see if we can turn one of those up. Okay, so this is a small spring salamander. We'll see if we can get a bigger one. But I'm sorry, that wasn't a spring. That looks like a spring from the road. This is a red salamander. So this is the in the same genus as that mud salamander from earlier, Pseudotriton. So this is Pseudotriton ruber, and this is just maybe a kilometer or so from the Pseudotriton montanus, the mud salamander. So we'll get him off the road. Just gorgeous little salamanders here. Oh, like many of them, one of my favorites. Go on, buddy. Get off the road. This is a main road. No need to have you getting squished. Alright, cool. Alright, not an amphibian, but just thought I'd show you it because it's pretty cool. Look at the size of this earthworm here. That's pretty neat. The big old night crawler. That'll make some salamander just tickle pink. Okay, we're down in this area, and it's a pretty low-key kind of area, so I'm going to go ahead and get out. I think this is another red salamander. It might be a spring, so we'll take a look. That's a red. Let me go ahead and switch the camera here. Alright, so I know you've already seen a couple of these tonight, but what's one more? One thing I forgot to mention is the way that you tell, they're usually a brighter red like that, but the way you tell them from the mud salamanders is their eyes usually have a black bar through the pupil, which is pretty diagnostic. I don't know if you can see it there, but it goes from, sort of from one end of the eye to the other, which is kind of neat. So there we go. Dirt road with a little red salamander down it. I love these guys. They're really cool. All right, guys, we are at the end of the road, literally, metaphorically. So we're going to go ahead and turn around and start to head back. And what I'll do is I'll probably only stop if it's something new that we haven't turned up before. But otherwise, we've had a good run tonight. We've seen. Gosh, let's see. We've seen red salamanders, mud salamanders. We saw northern dusky salamanders. We saw four-toed salamanders. We saw spotted salamanders. That might be it for the salamanders. But then we saw spring peepers. We saw American toads. We saw that one green frog, and I also saw a dead pickerel frog. So that's 9 species right there. Not bad at all. Certainly typical for a rainy night in March in western North Carolina. So pretty cool that we live so close to all this really neat amphibian diversity. And hopefully this whole pandemic rather, will pass soon enough, and you'll get to see this stuff firsthand. But until then, I'll take you along with me here digitally, and we'll keep on seeing some cool stuff. All right, have a good night, everybody.
'Cause it's okay to be small and slow at last. So when the final vote is cast, the top might be the bottom, and the least might be the best. The least might be the best. Oh, the least might be